There are a few things that tell me fall is right around the corner, like the blossoming goldenrod, the red speckledy wild blackberry leaves, which means they're dying off for the season, and the wild muscadines that are finally ripe enough to eat. Fall coming near also means it's apple season, and I wanted to share some of my favorite recipes. First, we're going to make fermented apple cider. This is a healthy probiotic drink that's delicious and buttery, and this recipe is adapted from the book Nourishing Traditions. We're starting with 16 organic apples, and we're going to wash them well. Then we're going to chop them up, leaving the skins on and removing the cores. Keep in mind that we're not making hard cider, but this may have a little bit of alcohol in the end, so maybe don't drink it while you're pregnant. Don't worry if you don't have a juicer, you can still make this recipe. You can use a blender, so put your apple pieces a little bit at a time in your blender. Start out slowly and blend up your apples into a puree. Remember, don't add any water to make it more easy to blend. Then place a flour sack cloth over a large bowl and pour your puree onto the flour sack towel. Lift your flour sack towel and begin to squeeze and allow to drip, and it comes out pretty easily. If you have a juicer, you can go ahead and throw your pieces into your juicer. Just remember that the juicer is going to make a foam, and you will have to remove that foam before fermenting. Once you have juiced all of your apples, it's time to add a heaping tablespoon of salt and 2.5 tablespoons of whey. Then combine all your ingredients well. Make sure to use a homemade whey from homemade dairy products. Don't just use like whey from anything pasteurized at the store. This recipe makes about 1 quart of cider, so pour your juice mixture into a quart-sized jar. Cover your jar with a cloth and secure tightly. You're going to let this ferment for 3 days at room temperature, and you're going to scrape off anything that's on the top. It might get a little moldy. Then you'll allow it to ferment in the refrigerator for a month, where it'll develop flavors. After that, you're ready to enjoy. Next, we're making a delicious savory meal. We're using onions and apples in this recipe, as well as sausage, and I use a grass-fed beef sausage. So first, slice up your onion. I like to use a yellow onion. Preheat some butter on a pan, and then add your sliced onions and begin to saute them. I like to saute my onions with a little bit of salt. It speeds up the process and I think helps develop the flavor. Next, peel and chop your apple. I like to use a sweet apple for this recipe. This one is a Gala apple. Add your sliced apples to your already sauteing onions and continue to cook. While those are cooking, slice up your sausage. Again, I like to use a grass-fed beef sausage. This one was a Polish sausage and it turned out really well. I would be very careful about what kind of pork sausage you're buying. Now it's time to add your sliced sausage to the pan and continue cooking. This recipe pairs very nicely with fresh sage, so while everything's cooking, I like to go ahead and pick my sage, and then I will break it up and add it to the pan. Once your sausage is nicely browned, your onions have caramelized, and your apples turn a deeper yellow, you're ready to enjoy. And I like to enjoy this meal with some warmed sauerkraut. For our next recipe, we are grinding some fresh einkorn flour, and we're going to make a pie. First, shred 1 stick of pasture-raised butter. In a mixing bowl, combine half a cup of refreshed sourdough starter, 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of coconut sugar, 1 cup of whole grain einkorn flour, and then add your 1 stick of grated butter. Then combine everything well with your hands. Then cover and let that ferment for 3 hours at room temperature, then put it in the fridge for an hour to cool down. While your pie crust is chilling in the refrigerator, you can go ahead and prepare your pie filling. Peel and chop 7 apples. I prefer to use Granny Smith apples. I think this recipe works really well as more of a tart pie, but you can use a sweeter apple if you like. To your chopped apples, add 1/3 cup of organic maple syrup, the juice of half of a fresh lemon, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, and a pinch of salt, and a 1/4 cup of sourdough starter to make it a little bit thick. This makes it so we don't have to add fresh flour. We can have everything in our pie fermented. Mix everything together with your hands. Now that our pie dough is chilled, it's time to form our crust. So I'm forming it on top of wax paper, and then I'm going to flip it over on top of the pie. And you'll notice that I'm only doing a top crust. So I'm rolling the dough pretty thin, probably about 1/4 centimeter or so. And then I'm going to carefully flip it over onto the pie pan and carefully take that wax paper off. And of course, you want to use the shiny side of the wax paper so that it will peel right off. Next, I'm cutting the excess dough, and you can make your crust as big as you like. I actually did mine on the inside of the pan because I do prefer less crust. Make sure to slice some little slits in your pie very carefully for some air to be able to escape. And with that extra dough, I did a little apple decoration. You're going to bake this pie covered for 20 minutes in a 375-degree oven. I like to use a stainless steel plate, not aluminum foil. And then at the halfway mark, after 20 minutes, uncover your pie, and I like to put an egg wash on top. So just baste your pie with egg whites. Then put your pie back in for another 20 to 30 minutes until it turns golden brown on top. I'm enjoying a slice fresh out of the oven with some raw milk vanilla ice cream. Our final recipe is apple butter, and it's actually really easy to make in a pressure cooker. So peel, core, and slice 6 apples, and then add 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground allspice, 1/2 cup of coconut sugar, and 1/2 cup of water. Pressure cook it on high for 1.5 hours, then blend with an immersion blender, and you're going to simmer it on low setting of slow cook for 2 to 3 hours until it's the consistency that you like. You'll see it turns really nice and dark brown, and I would use a sweeter apple for this recipe. My favorite way to enjoy apple butter is on einkorn sourdough English muffins with butter, and it makes for a delicious part of a healthy breakfast. Thanks for watching. I hope this video gave you some ideas of ways to enjoy apples this fall.